Some feuds begin with a fight, some with a misunderstanding. But the hatred between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford began with a man, and it would tear Hollywood apart for 40 years. In 1935, everyone whispered in the corridors of Warner Bros. Studios, Bette Davis was the studio's rising star. Her piercing gaze, sharp tongue, and passionate devotion to acting captured everyone's attention. Joan Crawford was MGM's queen, known for her impeccable wardrobe, controlled image, and camera-ready smile that never faltered. The two women had never crossed paths until that moment. They lived in different studios, different worlds, until a handsome actor named Franchot Tone entered both their lives. Bette met Franchot on the set of Dangerous. Something sparked between them. No one knew exactly what happened, but everyone on the studio lot noticed the light in Bette's eyes. For the first time, someone saw her not just as a star, but as a woman. But Franchot had other plans. A few weeks later, he announced his engagement to Joan Crawford. When Bette Davis heard the news, her face showed nothing. She simply lit her cigarette, took a deep breath, and turned to her assistant with ice in her voice. She asked who Joan Crawford was supposed to be. That day, the first seeds of a lifelong war were planted. Joan and Franchot's wedding was a lavish ceremony. They were called Hollywood's brightest couple. But backstage, whenever Joan heard Bette's name, her expression darkened. One day in her dressing room, she turned to her friends and declared that Bette Davis was nothing but noise. She insisted that real acting required no shouting, no theatrics, just a perfectly controlled performance. Years passed. Franchot Tone left Joan. Their marriage was a disaster. Joan never forgave the failure, especially not to Bette, because in her mind, Bette remained that woman. The woman who perhaps had always lived in Franchot's thoughts. By the 1940s, Bette Davis was Hollywood's biggest star. She had won 2 Oscars, and her name meant guaranteed success for producers. Joan Crawford, meanwhile, was living through the darkest period of her career. MGM had fired her. They told her she was too old. She was 41. For Joan, this was a death sentence. But she refused to surrender. She transferred to Warner Bros. Bette Davis's studio. Now they would walk the same hallways, attend the same meetings, and perhaps fight for the same roles. Their first encounter happened in the studio cafeteria. Joan entered with her perfect hat and flawless makeup. Bette sat at her table smoking, surrounded by writers and directors. As Joan passed Bette's table, she nodded slightly and spoke her name with calculated politeness. Bette never removed the cigarette from her lips, never lifted her eyes, and simply replied with Joan's name. Cold, distant, venomous. From that moment, the war officially began. Joan accepted every role. Bette rejected at the studio. That's how Mildred Pierce came to her. And with that role, she won an Oscar. At the 1946 Academy Awards ceremony, as Joan delivered her tearful acceptance speech on stage, Bette Davis sat in a corner of the auditorium with a frozen smile on her face, applauding mechanically, but her eyes burned with fire. Years later, Bette would say in an interview that Joan deserved the Oscar for the performance. But the way she took the stage, those tears, that dramatic gesture, it was all calculated. She explained that Joan Crawford always performed. Even life itself was just another film set to her. In the 1950s, both women felt their careers becoming more difficult. Young actresses were arriving. Hollywood was changing. Bette and Joan were now being categorized as aging stars, relics of a bygone era. Then one day, a screenplay arrived at Bette Davis's agency. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? A strange, dark story about 2 aging sisters who were once famous. Bette read the script and jumped to her feet with excitement. She declared it was her film, the role she had been waiting for. But the producers imposed a condition. Both female characters needed to be played by famous names. Box office guarantee was essential. Bette paused for a moment. Then she took a deep breath and forced the words out. She told them to call Joan Crawford. When Joan received the phone call, she couldn't believe it. Bette Davis wanted to work with her. After years of ignoring each other, belittling each other, hating each other, they would make a film together. The moment Joan hung up the phone, she looked in the mirror. A triumphant smile spread across her face. She whispered to herself that finally, Bette Davis needed her. But this was only the beginning. The real war would start when the cameras began rolling. The first day on the set of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane felt like a carefully orchestrated dance of politeness, covering an ocean of hostility. Director Robert Aldrich knew what he was dealing with. Two legends, two massive egos, 4 decades of buried rage. He walked onto that soundstage, knowing he was sitting on a powder keg. Bette arrived first, wearing no makeup, her hair already styled in the grotesque blonde curls her character, Baby Jane Hudson, required. She looked like a nightmare version of a child star, which was exactly what the role demanded. She greeted the crew warmly, joked with the lighting crew, and took her position on set. Then Joan arrived, 20 minutes late, dressed immaculately in a cream suit, hair perfectly coiffed, makeup flawless. She moved through the set like royalty, inspecting her domain. She didn't look at Bette directly, but everyone felt the coldness radiating between them. Aldrich called for the first take. The scene required Bette's character to serve Joan's character. Wheelchair-bound Blanche. A meal, simple blocking. Basic dialogue. But the tension was suffocating. Bette delivered her lines with venomous perfection. Joan responded with icy control. When Aldrich called cut, both women immediately retreated to opposite corners of the stage. Not a word exchanged between takes. Not a glance. The crew quickly learned the rules. Never mention Joan in front of Bette. Never praise Bette within Joan's earshot. Keep both dressing rooms as far apart as physically possible. But the silent war wasn't enough for either of them. They needed weapons, and they found them. Joan discovered that in many scenes, Bette's character would have to physically move her, lift her wheelchair, or stand over her. So Joan began wearing a weighted belt under her costume. Small lead weights sewn into a canvas belt hidden beneath her dress. The first time Bette tried to lift the wheelchair during a take, she nearly threw out her back. Bette realized immediately what Joan had done. She said nothing to Aldrich, didn't complain to the producers. She simply smiled at Joan, between takes, and made a mental note. Revenge would come. And it did. In one crucial scene, Baby Jane was supposed to kick Blanche as she lay helpless on the floor. Aldrich had arranged for the kick to be faked, camera angles making it appear brutal, while Bette's foot would stop inches from Joan's body. Bette had other ideas. On take 3, her foot connected, hard, right into Joan's ribs. Joan gasped, the pain genuine and visible. But she didn't cry out, didn't stop the scene. She continued her lines through gritted teeth. When Aldrich called cut, Joan stood up slowly, stared directly at Bette for the first time that day, and walked off set without a word. She returned the next morning with her own plan. There was a scene where Blanche had to slap Baby Jane. Joan practiced the motion dozens of times that morning, making sure her aim was perfect. When the cameras rolled, her hand connected with Bette's face with a crack that echoed through the soundstage. Bette's head snapped to the side. For a moment, everyone froze, waiting for the explosion. But Bette simply touched her reddening cheek, smiled at Joan with pure venom, and said the line was perfect. They could move on. Aldrich later confided to friends that directing Baby Jane felt like refereeing a prize fight where both boxers were trying to kill each other in slow motion. The psychological warfare extended beyond physical violence. Joan had a habit of inviting the crew, the producers, and various studio executives to her dressing room for cocktails after shooting. She served premium whiskey, told charming stories, and subtly planted seeds of doubt about Bette's professionalism. Bette never attended these gatherings. Instead, she stayed on set, working with Aldrich on the next day's scenes, refining her performance, making herself indispensable. She made sure everyone knew that while Joan was playing hostess, she was the one actually committed to the work. The press caught wind of the tension. Reporters began showing up, asking pointed questions, trying to bait both actresses into public statements. Joan maintained her gracious facade, praising Bette's talent while somehow making it sound like an insult. She would say things like Bette was so dedicated, so intense, sometimes she forgot there were other people in the scene. Bette responded with surgical precision. She told one reporter that working with Joan was educational. She claimed she had learned so much about the importance of appearance over substance. When the film was released in 1962, it became a massive success. Critics praised both performances. Audiences couldn't get enough of the gothic horror of two aging stars destroying each other on screen. It revived both their careers. The Academy Award nominations were announced. Bette Davis received a nomination for Best Actress. Joan Crawford did not. This should have been Bette's moment of complete victory. But Joan had one final move to make. Joan began a campaign. She contacted every Best Actress nominee who couldn't attend the ceremony. She offered to accept the award on their behalf, if they won. It was presented as a gracious gesture, a veteran actress honoring her peers. But everyone in Hollywood knew the truth. Joan Crawford was making sure that if she couldn't win, Bette Davis wouldn't have her moment either. Oscar night arrived. Bette sat in the audience. Knowing she had a real chance, the category was announced. The envelope opened. Anne Bancroft won for The Miracle Worker. But Anne was in New York, performing on Broadway. Joan Crawford rose from her seat, a triumphant smile on her face, and walked to the stage. She accepted Anne Bancroft's Oscar, delivered a gracious speech, and basked in the spotlight that should have been Bette's. She made sure the cameras captured every moment of her glory. Bette sat in the audience, her face a mask of composure. But those who knew her saw the fury burning in her eyes. Joan had stolen her moment, had made sure that even in loss she would dominate the evening. Backstage, after the ceremony, Joan posed for photos with the Oscar that wasn't hers. Reporters surrounded her, praising her generosity. Bette watched from a distance, cigarette in hand, and muttered to a friend that Joan would clutch any Oscar, even someone else's. The success of Baby Jane meant studios wanted a reunion. They were offered Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, another Southern Gothic thriller. Joan signed on, eager for another box office success. But during production, something unexpected happened. Joan claimed illness. She missed days of shooting. When she did appear, she seemed distant, disconnected. The producers grew frustrated. The production fell behind schedule. Then, rumors began. Joan wasn't sick. She was terrified. Terrified that Bette was giving the performance of a lifetime, and she couldn't compete. Terrified that this film would prove what everyone suspected, that Bette Davis was the true actress, and Joan Crawford was just a movie star. After weeks of delays, the producers had enough. They fired Joan and replaced her with Olivia de Havilland. Joan claimed medical reasons for her departure. But Hollywood insiders knew better. She had run from Bette Davis. Bette never publicly commented on Joan's exit. But on set she told Olivia that working with her was such a relief. She mentioned how pleasant it was to work with a real actress, instead of a personality. The two women never worked together again. They never reconciled, never made peace. Their war continued in interviews, in subtle jabs, in calculated silences. In 1977, Joan Crawford died. Bette Davis was asked to comment. Her response became legendary. She simply stated that one should never speak ill of the dead, only the truth. She added that Joan's death was unfortunate, and with a slight pause mentioned she wished she could have attended the funeral. When pressed about what she meant, Bette clarified. She explained that she had simply wanted to make sure Joan was actually dead. That quote became the final word in their 40-year war. No forgiveness, no sentimentality. Just pure, unfiltered, Bette Davis honesty. Years later, when Bette herself was near death, a reporter asked if she had any regrets about her relationship with Joan. Bette took a long drag from her cigarette, thought for a moment, and delivered her final verdict. She said that Joan Crawford was a great movie star. Not a great actress, but a great star. She admitted that Joan understood the machinery of fame better than anyone. The image, the publicity, the control of narrative. Joan was a master of all of it. But Bette continued. Joan never understood one crucial thing, that all the image control in the world couldn't hide the truth that would eventually be revealed on screen. The camera, Bette insisted, always knows who's really acting and who's just performing. She took another drag from her cigarette and smiled. Bette concluded that Joan spent her whole life trying to be perfect, trying to control every moment, every photograph, every word. And in the end, what was she remembered for? For hating Bette Davis. That, Bette suggested, was the real tragedy. Not their feud, but that Joan had allowed it to define her just as much as her films did. Bette Davis died in 1989, 12 years after Joan. In her final interviews, she remained unrepentant about their war. She never apologized, never softened, never pretended it was all just Hollywood dramatics. Because for Bette it wasn't drama, it was truth. Two women fighting for survival in an industry that discarded actresses the moment they showed age. Two talents competing for the same limited space. Two egos refusing to bend. Their feud became legendary not because it was unique, but because both women refused to hide it. In an era when female stars were expected to be gracious, supportive, and quietly resentful, Bette and Joan were openly, magnificently, unapologetically at war. And perhaps that's why we still talk about them today. Not just for their performances, though those were extraordinary, but for their refusal to perform off-screen. Their determination to be exactly who they were, even when it made them look petty, vindictive, and cruel. They were Hollywood royalty who refused to wear crowns, queens who fought with knives instead of scepters, legends who became even more legendary by hating each other with perfect professional precision. The story of Bette Davis and Joan Crawford isn't really about hatred. It's about two women who loved their craft so much they couldn't bear to share the throne. It's about ambition so fierce it consumed everything, including the possibility of friendship. It's about Hollywood's golden age, when stars were truly larger than life, and their battles were just as epic as any film they made. In the end, they both got what they wanted. Immortality. We remember their names, their films, their brilliance, but we also remember their war, because that war was just as real, just as powerful as anything they ever performed. And maybe, somewhere beyond the veil, they're still fighting, still trading insults, still refusing to give an inch, because some feuds don't end with death. Some feuds become part of history. And the feud between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford will live forever, as fierce and unforgiving as the two women who created it.